The laser. A useful tool. But the laser is a double-edged sword. On one side, a beneficial tool. On the other, a dangerous instrument that can be harmful to those who use it. Normal clothing offers no protection from the laser beam. Almost any fabric will catch fire. Not only is the direct beam dangerous, but reflections also may be hazardous. Specular beams are reflections from a lens. They can be thrown in any direction from the lens surface. Anyone in the area may come in contact with the reflections. In some instances, contrary to the obvious, the farther away one stands from the target, the greater will be the damage to the eye.
What's up everyone, you got Mind Circus here with you, and welcome to another Mind Over Meta open world build, and today we're going to be looking at Holosmith. But before we get started, if you are new to the channel, new to Guild Wars 2 or just haven't done so yet, I am currently farming likes and subscribes in an effort to build the channel. If you want to hook me up with one of those just below the video, that'd be awesome. And with that out of the way, hey, Holosmith, you gotta love this thing. But this build starts with a story. So I'm sitting there with Catty Wampus, the best dance support scrapper on Jake Quarry, and she's regaling me with one of her World vs. World troll stories, which I tend to find pretty entertaining. In case you don't know, when Catty's in a sporting mood, she goes into World vs. World on her support scrapper, and she'll see how many of those ass clowns from Maguma it'll take to move her off at camp, you know, just for laughs. And she's telling me about how she's holding off these 4 dudes for about 10 minutes. She's not killing any of them, but she's making sure these guys can't take the camp and frustrating them until they either rage quit or, you know, call 10 of their buddies to finally put her down, and so they can throw siege on her and dance on her corpse and brag about their KDR. And finally, I ask, hey, what kind of gear were you running to do this? And that's when she says, Celestial. And I'm like, what? Celestial Scrapper, is that really a thing? And so Catty gets all shy and she won't say anything, and I, of course, I'm not letting this go. I'm like, come on, give me your Celestial Scrapper build. And she backs right down, right? And she says, oh no, it was just minstrels. And so I have a hard time believing all this, and for the next 4.5 hours I'm sitting there doing everything I can to make Celestial Scrapper a thing. And finally, I admit defeat. I am laying there on the floor of the bar in a puddle of my own tears of frustration and slobber from one of my home instance cats, reconsidering my life choices and cursing Catty for her role in my demise. And then finally, the answer comes to me. So, for me, Holosmith is one of those simpler pleasures. It's a very high damage spec that's best meant for power usually. And when I initially tried to make a solid open world build for it, I found it lacking. Every time I was playing it, I found myself wishing I was on Reaper or Condi Rev. I just couldn't find a way to give it that missing je ne sais quoi. It's not to say that I wasn't playing it. My number one go-to spec for power DPS and instance content for like strikes or fractals or DRMs has been holo for quite a while now. My limited success in SPVP also came on Holosmith. It's a really fun spec. But when it came to open world, I always felt that the spec fell short of a lot of the other options. This is, of course, because I wasn't leveraging many of the traits, and I was gearing it in a mix of full berserkers and assassins to maximize the DPS. It's also because this was before the changes to Celestial gear a few months ago. And in case you've been living under a rock or just coming back to the game and haven't been paying attention or something like that, that change a few months ago was one that added the concentration and expertise stats to the gear set without sacrificing any of the other statistics on it. So it really became a much more viable set of gear at that point, particularly for open world. I've said it before, but Celestial gear isn't right for every class or spec. In order for it to really shine, it kind of needs a spec that does a meaningful spread of its damage across both Condi and power, and it needs to be generating a decent amount of boons. That said, when set up right, Holosmith actually does these things. Many of the attacks inflict burning, lots of bleeding is available, several of the traits in this build will leverage these conditions pretty effectively. For boon generation, we're actually going to be using elixirs, which are very powerful and sometimes overlooked. So, let's see how it did. Basic AoE checks were pretty spectacular, actually. Photon Forge is straight up fun in situations where you need to be playing for AoE pressure. The kit also offers a fair bit of stability, so in situations like the Lake Dork Centaur camp, this became a hilariously fun experience. Moving on to basic open world champions, totally not a problem. While this setup doesn't offer the same level of sustain as, say, Condi Rev or Scourge, it's still super strong, and it does have access to a very strong and quick recharging heal that can make it easy to handle things like the Giant Cursed Shore or the Broodmother and Frostgorge sound. HOT hero points were predictably smooth. I managed each that I tried without issue. Tarnished Sage, Mordrim Flower, and in particular the Troll Runestone, which you're probably looking at on your screen right now, were actually really smooth and fun. Not too much else to say here. If you're looking for an open world holo build, this one really tends to start to shine under the harder content. Harder open world events were absolutely awesome. Lake Jork Jade Cannons are absolutely doable smoothly thanks to the setup's decent amount of CC, but where I found this one to be the most fun was in Jahai during the Rift events. This build was exceptionally satisfying here and really handled it all really great. And finally, hey, Desert Bounties were absolutely soloable on this build. Its strong self-sustain and acceptable damage put it in a fine place to handle the ones that I usually give a try, and you'll have to be prepared to work the mechanics, but I found that even on leyline modifiers like the Healing Tendrils, it was really pretty smooth. So while it's not in the same class as Condi Mirage or the Scourge builds that I've put up on the channel under these conditions, I found it super fun and satisfying. Hey, did I use the word fun enough? Let's get into the strengths and weaknesses. So, in terms of these strengths and weaknesses on this build, the number one is one that I can't really quantify, and that's fun factor. I've obviously been pretty clear about my enjoyment of Engineer, specifically over the last few videos, both in this series and in the support series. I absolutely love Engineer, but what makes this one fun is a little bit of quickness, some decent damage, and really just the ways to mitigate things that make things smooth. So we tend to discount the value of things like stability and the way that it makes our life easy in open world, but this build generates a ton of stab and really is a fun experience, and I wish I had a better way to put it, but it is the number one thing I enjoyed about this build specifically. The number two strength on this one is going to be boon generation. This build generates a lot of really fun, important boons. Did I just say fun again? I think I did. And really, in addition to the stab, it's self-stacking might, it's bringing a little bit of fury, it's bringing some other things to the table that we'll take a look at in a little bit, but its boon generation is really strong, and I think that that's one of the things that really stood out as I was playing this build. And finally, the number 2 strength on this one is it's totally simple to play. And I bring this up because it's Engineer, and a lot of people steer clear of Engineer because of the complexity of it, and that really relates to the kits. We won't actually be using any kits on this build specifically. We're going to be leaning on elixirs more than kits, and this is by design. Really what I was looking for was just a simple way to play this one, and I think I was pretty successful in it. And if you're one of those players that's been steering away from NG because you don't want to be flipping into kits constantly, or because you find the whole mechanic of it counterintuitive, I would really suggest you kind of give this one a try if you've got the equipment sitting around for it, because it's really, really simple to play. And that's not something that we can say about a lot of Engineer builds. This doesn't actually rely on a lot of combo fields like some of the other builds you may have seen me put up on the channel, particularly for Engineer. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. In terms of the weaknesses on this build, the number 1 I'm going to point out is the lack of passive sustain. Now, that's not a total game changer or killer on this one. And when I say a lack of passive sustain, if you've been watching my channel and my open world builds, you know I'm a very big fan of anything that's constantly regenerating health, whether it be Condi Rev or Scourge via the Torment runes, or things like Might Makes Right on Warrior, or Invigorating Precision on the Daredevil build I put up. You know that the lack of that passive sustain is really one of the things I will highly prize when it comes to open world builds. This build doesn't generate that much of it. It's not a meaningful amount. That said, what we do have instead is a really powerful heal that comes back really quickly. So we're going to be reducing the recharge of our heal pretty seriously. So it doesn't contain the same kind of passive face roll potential that maybe a couple of the other builds on the channel do, but it's sustain is not a problem. The number 2 weakness of this one I'm going to point to is the overheating mechanic in the Photon Forge. We will be going into Photon Forge on Holosmith fairly regularly. If you've never played Holosmith, I'll describe this for you, and then we'll go over it a little bit more in the gameplay section. But as you are in the Photon Forge, where we are going to be getting the vast majority of our damage, we are generating a mechanic called heat. As we get to a certain point, that heat actually starts to burn us. That burning is not an insignificant amount and can really put you in a bad place if you're not watching that heat mechanic. So it's something to keep in mind. It's not, a deal breaker in my books, and that may be, and I'll be totally transparent about that. It may be because I played a fair bit of Holosmith, but I don't think it's the kind of situation where a newer player would really struggle with it, but it is the kind of thing that we're going to have to keep in mind, and again, we'll go over that in the gameplay section. And finally, it's a little expensive. We're going to be, of course, as I've mentioned in the past, we are going to be relying on Celestial gear for this tune, and Celestial gear can be a little expensive to craft. It is not the kind of thing that I would recommend you go out and buy on the TP. I think the TP prices for Celestial gear are vastly overpriced. That said, when it comes to trinkets, you've got a few options, and while I'm not usually the one to recommend you go and spend your laurels on Ascended trinkets, in the case of Celestial gear, you might be good to go ahead and do that. Those Celestial trinkets also drop fairly regularly in World versus World and in Fractals, so you may want to keep that in mind, that the gear for this in terms of the trinkets is not going to be awful. You can buy those trinkets in the Fractal lobby, you can buy them from a laurel vendor, you can actually buy them, some of them for guild commendations, so keep that in mind as you are putting this together, that the Celestial trinkets are not the deal breaker that they may have been in the past, but that the armor is the kind of thing that you're going to want to have stat selectable gearboxes ready for, or you're going to want to go all in, and you're going to want to be charging quartz every day, and that's one of those mechanics that is kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It's not awful, but it is a bit of a time sink. It's better than it used to be, but still not a great way to go about building a gear set. So, stat selectable armor boxes, stat selectable trinkets are going to be obviously a big one, but if you're sitting on a bunch of pristine fractal relics, if you're sitting on a bunch of guild commendations, if you are sitting on some laurels that you don't mind spending on this, then absolutely you can get some of those trinkets for, peanuts. So let's take a few seconds here and get into the build and gear portion of our entertainment this evening, and the first thing that we will start with is, of course, our gear. Now, in terms of the gear, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be running 100% Celestial gear. Now, for those of you who are a little out of the loop, Celestial gear offers us, quote-unquote, a little bit of everything, and absolutely everything. It's going to offer some power, precision, toughness, vitality, ferocity, healing power, condition damage, concentration, and expertise. It's going to offer an equal amount of all of these stats, and this build, I think, specifically, like a couple of the other ones that I put up, actually leverages the stat set really well. So, pretty easy. Again, our armor, our weapons are all going to be Celestial. Taking a look inside the armor, we're going to be running Berserker runes. We're going to be running Berserker runes because Berserker runes are a meaningful way to generate both strike damage, which is your power damage, and condition damage. And if we take a look at these, we are looking at a condition damage and power bump. And then when we get to the 6 on this is a flat 5% damage bonus for strike damage and a flat 5% condition damage bonus. So really liked these runes specifically on this set. I tried a couple of other ones. These ones really ended up shining more than just about anything else. In the weapons, we are going to be running sword and we are going to be running pistol. The sword will be an appreciable amount of strike damage with obviously some burning, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit. And we're going to get a fair bit of condi off the pistol. Now, in the sword, we're going to be running a Sigil of Strength. The Sigil of Strength you may be used to for a number of different things, but this is just might generation, and this build is going to cap its might pretty quickly with the Sigil in it. In terms of the pistol, I'm running a Sigil of Celerity in here. This is one of these choices I made for fun factor. I tried a half dozen different runes in here, or sigils in here. In terms of these, some of the other options, a Sigil of Bursting was really good. It provided a little bit more damage. A Sigil of Force was obviously another good choice here, which would, again, provide a small damage increase. But I didn't think that the damage increase on this was really as good as the fun factor from the Celerity. So the Celerity Sigil is actually giving us quickness for 5 seconds after disabling a foe. We have a lot of CC on this build, and that's going to proc pretty regularly. So when we take a look at the quickness that's generated from this, we're getting 5 seconds on a 20-second cooldown. We're also going to have a couple of other sources of quickness on it, and I really felt the quickness on this kind of outbalanced the small potential damage increase that I was getting from some of the other options in terms of sigils. Another sigil that you may want to try in this one that I got some fun results was a Sigil of Severance, which are absolutely cheap on the TP. But there we have it. That is our gear. So let's go over to the build here at this point. Our build here, we are going to be leveraging the firearms, alchemy, and holosmith. In firearms, we are going to be taking chemical rounds, gain condition damage. Your pistol skills gain increased condition duration. This is going to feed into a couple of different things here. It's not the only choice here. High caliber is not bad, which gives us a critical chance increase of 15% within the range threshold, but I really found that the condi damage increase here was actually of bigger value. Sanguine Array is not bad. We do inflict some bleeding on this, but overall speaking, I went with chemical rounds after some testing and got better results on that. We'll be using Thermal Vision, which will gain expertise. Will also increase your outgoing condition damage when you inflict burning. We will be constantly inflicting burning on this build. There's just no two ways about it. So this really does outshine the other two options here. The pinpoint distribution, if you're in larger groups where you know that people are running Condi builds, is probably an overall damage increase, and it's something that you may want to keep in mind, but strictly speaking, I actually went with Thermal Vision on this one. No Scope is okay, but I didn't find that the Fury generation on this and the Ferocity really increased the damage as much as the Expertise and the increased condition damage from Thermal Vision. We're going to be using Incendiary Powder, so burning you inflict, it lasts longer, and your critical hits inflict burning. This is going to be a big source of our burning. There will be some other burning that we generate on this one, and this of course feeds back into Thermal Vision. All right, so this is a really strong choice. Let me take a couple of quick seconds here and say that if you want to run a flamethrower build, you can absolutely do so very effectively, and I did on this one. You'd definitely want to put Juggernaut in here, and you'd want to change one of the other options down here, and we'll get into that in a couple of seconds. But if you're one of those people dying for a good flamethrower build, the Celestial setup actually works really well, and putting Juggernaut in here is probably your best option. Modified ammunition did not give the damage that I was really looking for that I got with Incendiary Powder. All right. Under Alchemy, and we are running Alchemy here for the Grandmaster more than anything else. Under Alchemy, we're going to be running Health Insurance, which increases your incoming healing effectiveness, gain increased healing to others while you use a medkit. We're not going to be using the medkit, so we're not going to be getting the benefit of that. But health insurance is absolutely very, very good and a better option than maybe the other two that you get here. Swiftness and Vigor, not bad. And in fact, the Vigor is not a bad choice, and we'll get into that in a couple of seconds. But I went with health insurance. Emergency elixir here we are taking because the other two options aren't very good. And the other two options being combat cure, which is current regeneration when you remove a condition from an ally. As I've said before, conditions in open world are kind of a mixed bag. Some areas have them, some areas don't. The Condi play just isn't worth trading into for open world. Backpack regenerator is not a great option for this specific setup. That said, if you want to run the flamethrower and you go ahead and you set on Juggernaut here, definitely take Backpack Regenerator, but Backpack Regenerator actually offers us nothing because we're not using any kits on this build. But we are going to be using HGH, which is elixirs gain reduced recharge and increased durations, and also grant might. This is specifically going to come into the fact that we are running 3 different elixirs. Most specifically, this is actually going to bring our heal back really quickly. So if you see, our heal's actually on a 20-second cooldown here. If we change that, that's a 25-second cooldown. That is a 5-second change in your cooldown reduction on your heal, and that can be the difference between life and death in a lot of situations. So I would definitely kind of recommend this Alchemy setup. There are obviously different ways to run it, but this is the one that actually gave me the most benefit. The other thing that we get actually off this trait line here is actually compounded chemicals, which is heal yourself when you grant yourself a boon. This is where we're going to get a bit of the minimal amount of passive sustain from this build. We are generating boons on a fairly regular basis, so running this trait is actually of pretty big value to us. Finally, let's take a look at Holosmith here. Under Holosmith, we are going to be running Solar Focusing Lens. Your first few attacks after entering or exiting Photon Forge inflict burning. This gets back to the traits that we were talking about up here, about increasing our outgoing condition damage when we inflict burning. This is a really high value trait here. The other options here I didn't find were as powerful or as beneficial. Let's take a look here at Crystal Configuration Eclipse. Corona Burst grants barrier for each target struck. Holo Leap, removing movement impairing conditions, is best kept for competitive. And this is not bad. Running the Crystal Configuration Storm is also a decent option here, but I actually found that the Eclipse was of a little bit better value. And finally, we're going to be running Vent Exhaust. Now, what Vent Exhaust does is, as we are generating heat, and we'll go over this in the gameplay section, what we are actually going to do is we are going to be releasing that heat as a burning damage attack as we are dodging. And this is a really, really fun thing. It harkens back to the Daredevil spec, where we are generating damage as we're dodging and turning our dodge into a more aggressive and impactful and fun kind of effect. And I really like Vent Exhaust for a lot of different reasons. The other thing is it helps with our heat management. So big fan of this trait. The others available here, the increased capacity storage unit is not bad. And the photonic blasting module, again, is also not bad because it reduces the impact of the burning from when you are overheating. If you find yourself overheating for a little while, moving to this might be a good choice. But when it came to raw fun factor, which is kind of why I built this, what I built this whole thing around, Vent Exhaust was absolutely the best option. So let's leave it at that, and that, my friends, is our build. So with that said, hey, let's have a fashion break. So super happy with the fashion on this tune, not gonna lie, but I will warn you that a large amount of this, and I think almost all of it, comes from the gem store, so I'll be pretty transparent about that. We have the Magitech helmet of the Berserker, the Magitech helmet, which is just this eyepiece here. Of course, that's from the Magitech set. Again, a gem store set, easily gained. We have the Falconer shoulder pads, and I believe the Falconer shoulder pads are T2 human cultural. So easily gained. Hey, a quick little pro tip about the cultural armor sets. A lot of really, really nice armor sets in the cultural armor sets, and highly recommend that if you are looking to get into those sets and start completing them or collecting them or getting a few pieces, getting these in World versus World is significantly cheaper. And when I say significantly cheaper, I mean I believe it's about half price to buy those, as long as you've got some of the currency from World versus World. The name escapes me. Let's take a look. Badges of Honor. Badges of Honor is what you'd need there. And if you've got some Badges of Honor, you can save a fair bit of money, both on the cultural armor sets and on the Ascended trinkets. There, I believe it also halves the cost of the Ascended trinkets if you are buying them in World versus World. So keep that in mind. We are going to be running the Magitech Jerkin. The Magitech Jerkin is just a really spectacular skin, but my character here thinks it makes her butt look big. We'll be using the Stalker gloves. The Stalker gloves are just a simple set of gloves, and they are one of the core sets. They are pretty easily gained in a number of different ways. So, a lot of different gloves could have worked on this tune, but I actually just wanted the simple ones on that one. We're going to be running the Magitech leggings. The Magitech leggings, obviously, pretty nice. They look really good with high contrast dyes, is another thing to keep in mind, and quite like those. And we'll be running the Aether Blade boots, which is from another gem store set. So the Magitech set being one, the Aether Blade set being another. Call me a full set Andy if you want, but that is kind of where I'm rocking this set and quite enjoy it. In terms of the weapons, we will be running plasma weapons. Now, the plasma weapons are a gem store set, but currently, if you do the Living World Season 4 achievements, you get a choice of either Mystic Coins or some of these Black Lion sets. And these Black Lion skins are really, really decent, and they kind of have a nice draw animation on them. So I'm a big fan of these. We'll be using the plasma pistol and the plasma sword. Been a big fan of those for a while. And one of the other things that we can run is, of course, the shield, and the shield is also really fantastic. And again, you know, you want to get some of these skins. Now is the time to do it, because they are being basically given out as achievement rewards for the Return to Living World Season 4 achievements. And obviously, we'll take another look when we stow these. They've got a really nice kind of effect on that, so very cool effect. And that, my friends, is our fashion. So let's go into the raid lobby here and take a look at how this is all going to come together. So we find ourselves in the raid lobby for a little bit of combat demo. We'll look at the bar, we'll look at some CC here. At this point, we'll get to the basic gameplay of this build. Let's start, of course, with the bar. The bar, I'm really happy with the way this is set up. I tried a bunch of different things, but I will make these as very strong recommendations, with possibly this utility here being swapped out for one other. We're going to be running 3 elixirs. Now, these elixirs are just packed with boons. It's really that simple, and that's the reason that we're going to run them. Specifically speaking, we'll be running Elixir H. Elixir H is going to be our heal. It additionally is going to pop down some protection on us, some regen, some swiftness, and a whole bunch of might. Well, 2 stacks of might, but it's going to put that might down for about 23 3/4 seconds, which is a significant amount of might, particularly when we're just talking about a heal. We're going to be running Elixir B. Elixir B will give us Fury, Might, Resolution, and Swiftness. Again, that's a whole lot of boons. And if we go back to the build here, let's keep in mind that as we are granting boons to ourselves, we're going to be giving ourselves a little bit of heal. So this is where the main amount of our passive sustain is going to come from, is by using these elixirs. And we're going to be using Elixir U. Elixir U is absolutely non-negotiable, is the best way to put it. It's going to give us over 11 seconds of quickness. It's going to give us over 11 seconds of 2 stacks of stability. It's going to give us vigor. It's going to give us might. It's going to be our stun break as well. It's overall just one of those totally packed engineer skills that, you know, I am a very, very big fan of. Moving on to the next utility, we'll be using Laserdisc. Now, there are 2 real options here. I like the Laserdisc because the damage, if you want to be, you know, focusing on the damage from your utilities, then Laserdisc is what you want to take. If you are more worried about boon generation and CC, then what we are going to run here is Hardlight Arena. Now, Hardlight Arena is going to give us Fury, Protection, and Regen. The other bonus of Hardlight Arena is this is going to give us Prismatic Singularity, which is a fairly strong CC ability, and we'll go over that in the CC section. But for the most part, when it came to just running damage, I just went with the Laserdisc. Finally, Prime Light Beam. Prime Light Beam is really nice damage, really nice CC. It's actually going to give us some burning as well. It's a very, very nice skill, and I'm a really big fan. And as an elite, it's only on a 60-second cooldown, so that's big value right there. So that's kind of the way our bar is set up. In terms of the damage, you know, this is not complicated stuff. We will be, obviously, you know, with our auto attack hitting this. All right. And we'll get some bleeding off our 2, as well as some damage. And the 3 comes into play because it's actually going to give us some quickness as well. And obviously quickness is a really, really big value. So if we hit the 3 there, pretty useful stuff. And again, if we go into Elixir U there, we'll see that this is obviously just going to be generating a bunch of quickness for us. That, in addition to the sigil that we're running, is going to give us a pretty high quickness uptime for, particularly for an engineer. So I'm a really big fan of this one, and that's really where we're going to run with that. In terms of the 4, so the offhand pistol, will be getting some burning here, and that's not an insignificant amount of burning, as you see here. Okay, we're also generating a whole bunch of vulnerability, which is obviously good, but you know, 5 stacks of burning is nothing that we can complain about. So that really is it. The 5 is best for a little bit of soft CC, really is the main way to put it. And if I drop that down, you'll see that. But again, we'll go over that in the CC section. So really, you know, firing these off cooldown is just great until we are fully charged for the Photon Forge. In the Photon Forge is where we're going to get the majority of our damage. Okay, we can drop obviously that field down. That's going to be all starting to stack up fairly quickly and fairly nicely that way. Now, in the Photon Forge, we do want to be careful about our heat mechanism, all right? And our heat mechanism, obviously, we can see that going right up, and I'll stop that before I start burning, but I didn't manage to, and there I am burning. So using your heal at that point becomes a really, really big benefit. And once that's cycled back down, I think we can actually just do that. We will go back into our Photon Forge. Really here we're going to focus on the auto attack. We're going to also hit the 2. Okay, now the 2 is also a bit of a gap closer, and we can hit this from farther away. And actually I find in scenarios where we need a little bit of quick movement, we can obviously just hit that, and it's on a fairly low cooldown. AoE pressure we will get largely from Corona Burst. Corona Burst is a really nice skill. Let's get out of the Photon Forge again before we start burning, and I didn't manage it again. And as you heard during my strengths and weaknesses, this is obviously something that we want to keep in mind, as that heat is absolutely going to start to hurt us. So that really is where we're at in terms of the damage. Our biggest damage obviously is going to come from Photon Blitz. So you see, as we start to put all that together, that's really going to be our damage. It's just kind of hitting these things off cooldown. And it kind of is that simple, you know, that plus the laser disc is really where our damage is going to come from, and not forgetting that Blade Burst is also really nice. Now, hey, anybody else see that bug yet? Oh my, I wonder what our next spec's going to be. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's take a little look, a little deep dive further into this. Once we are in combat, obviously, you know, we've got our heal. We've also got the F1, F2, and F3, which are going to be boon generation. Boon generation, again, as I mentioned before, is going to give us a fair bit of passive healing. Now, the boon generation that comes off the F1, F2, and F3, the real benefits of these are going to be the fact that these are selfless skills, so these are going to splash onto other people if they are within the in the area. And again, we can see that these boons start generating pretty quickly that way. And really, that's kind of one of the beautiful things about this build, is being able to put those boons down. Keeping in mind also that Toss Elixir U is, or sorry, Toss Elixir, is it U? Okay. Toss Elixir U, yes, is a group stun break. So this is one of those few skills in the game that actually will break stun on multiple allies in the area as well. Also keeping in mind the Prime Light Beam is really going to be big damage, big burns. It's a nice thing, so we like that. You can see as we just start to hit these things off cooldown, we're going to be generating a fair bit of burn there. Alright, and that's not an insignificant amount of condition damage in addition to our strike damage, which is one of the reasons why this build actually benefits from the Celestial gear fairly well. And really, that's kind of about it. I don't want to overload you guys because it's really simple. You know, go into Photon Forge when you can. Stay there as long as you can. The other thing to keep in mind, and we'll go back in here and we'll just see this in action a little bit. Okay, once we have built up that fire a little bit, the heat. Okay, and the heat down here is showing us that that's building up. If we dodge, that actually puts a little bit of burning down. So that really is not an insignificant amount of damage coming off there with a very little effort, I guess is the best way to put it. And that really is our basic damage and boon generation. In terms of our sustain, you know, we've got our heal. Alright, we've also got the Toss Elixir H, which is going to be giving us regen, which is obviously a fairly powerful boon. And keeping in mind, obviously, that the boons that we generate are going to be passively sustaining us. So let's come over here for a second and just reset our golem, and we'll take a quick look at the CC. We'll remove our current golem. We will spawn a new golem, an average golem, a weak enemy, Please spawn my golem. And let's take a look at the CC portion. We've got a few different options here. As I mentioned before, you know, if CC is a prime concern of yours, then taking out Laserdisc and putting Heartlight Arena in there is going to give us the Prismatic Singularity. And if we put Prismatic Singularity down, that's going to suck all the enemies in an area into one spot, which is really nice for dealing with trash mobs, but it's also some really good CC. We'll get some CC off the 5. Alright, you'll see that's some pretty strong soft CC. We'll get some CC off Prime Light Beam, which is not an insignificant amount of CC. And finally, in terms of the CC, if we go into Photon Forge and hit the 5, this is outstanding CC right here, and we see that. That's also area CC. And I'm a really, really big fan of that skill, so I would highly recommend that you get into that one if you're looking for some CC. And really, that's about it. You know, I don't want to, you know, bog you guys down, because particularly in terms of engineer builds, which tend to be very combo focused, and you know, one of those things that tend to ask people to hit a lot of buttons, this build specifically is actually a lot more simple than just about anything else. And that, friends, is Celestial Engineer, and specifically Celestial Holosmith for open world. I'm a really, really big fan of this one. This is one of those things I kind of cooked up, and just to put it into perspective, I actually moved my permanent gathering tools on it, which means it's a tool I am actually using quite a bit. And really, it's because it's one of those, you know, strong in every scenario kind of things, simple, fun, and I think I've used the word fun about 30 times in this video, but it absolutely is. The quickness really is a huge win, and I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. And I think I'll leave it at that at this point. I will just thank all of you who have, again, made it all the way through this video and have taken anything from it. Leave any kind of comments, suggestions that you have down in the comments down below, both constructive and the usual. For those of you who hit up all my videos with your comments, I love that you guys do that. You guys are really fantastic. And for those of you who may be a little bit more experienced or skilled on open world Holosmith, I'd love to hear from you if you've got any suggestions about things that you may be doing differently. And again, the only other thing I'll say before I sign out on this one is, if you're looking for a flamethrower build, make the changes that I put in there. We've got the Labyrinth coming up, so the Halloween Labyrinth farm coming up, which is obviously a pretty good annual gold farm, and I think Flamethrower NG is obviously top notch for farming the Labyrinth, and do keep that in mind. And really, that is about it at this point. I'm going to thank you all very, very much for watching. I'm going to remind you all to have fun in game and min-max your real life, and we'll see you again in the mists.